everyone, Michelle Fixit here. Disclosure, I've realized that the lighting in my bathroom is significantly better than the lighting that's in my bedroom at one of the houses. So I have I have this little mirror light that's here that's going to make me still look interesting, but I'm going to do my eyelashes while I expound on a recent exchange that I had on Facebook with someone that seems like they're having the same type of issues that I'm having. And so I'm on a Facebook group. I'm on so many Facebook groups, and they're really, really good to have. And so basically I saw that, you know, someone was finally accepted into a POTS clinic, and they were wondering if they should keep the appointment because it takes forever to get there, and then, like, you know, you keep trying to mitigate your symptoms and trying to find out what works, and so by the time that your appointment or, you know, your acceptance into this very specialized clinic happens, you're like, am I gonna gain anything from this? So I was like, hey, you know, I'm part of that POTS clinic too, and yeah, it took me like a year to get in. After, you know, preventatively, my cardiologist was like, I'm going to diagnose with you with POTS, because by the time that, you know, your intake for this very specific little POTS clinic is available, you will have taken your tilt test and probably passed it, as in, like, I have POTS, not as in, like, I expected to hear fail and it's actually positive, so it's confusing. So anyways, I was like, you know, I did learn some stuff, because I did. I learned some stuff about MCAS. I learned that it, you know, wasn't vital, according to the doctor that also had MCAS, to get a diagnosis on it. I learned a couple things. I, you know, was able to get a prescription for a blood pressure medication that would, you know, help increase my blood pressure, which was great. And, you know, it was a really useful exchange, because I don't really know personally a lot of people that are like me. I call them the me's, being that people that have some form of EDS, cranial cervical instability, Chiari malformation, MCAS, POTS, postural hypotension, just a whole bunch of stuff. People that have been previously diagnosed with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, migraines, and we're all just kind of like trucking it out and trying to figure stuff out for ourselves, because we've been medically gaslit for years and years, and it's very frustrating. It's going to be super fun, because normally I'm quiet whenever I put my eyelashes on. I'm trying to multitask. I'm supposed to be working on a rental right now. But, you know, I shared my video on CSF leaks and POTS to the group, because it was faster than typing, because, like, being part of those little Facebook groups requires, like, a lot of time to be a keyboard warrior of sorts, and, like, da-da-da-da, and then you have to wait, and then da-da-da-da, and then you have to wait, and da-da-da-da. And, like, even though it's a useful exchange of information, or, you know, you're helping someone, it still takes time out of your day. And when you're working with not a lot of time that you can be productive, because your body's constantly being special, it's just a faster rate of exchange, at least for me, to make videos and then post them and then put them on things that are relevant. And so that video resonated with someone, and so they were basically saying, because I have it pulled up here, they basically were like, you know, would you mind sharing what you're doing or have already done to fix your leak? And so I did exchange with her a lot, but it brought up a lot of very relevant things, and I was like, you know what, I need to do more videos, because I can help more, or like have a video to share in the future. So what I'm doing and what I've already done to work on fixing my leak. So and I'm probably gonna have people grump at me. I was diagnosed with CCI, cervical cranial instability, which is like a neck head issue. Because if you're an EDS, or like all of your stuff just like all of your ligaments and all of that, just like your arms hyperextend, your legs hyperextend. Like, we have too much flex, okay? We're just special people, and our bodies don't want to do normal people stuff because that would just make life boring. And so this is relevant to other people as well. And I guess that's going to segue to another video where, you know, in the day and age of cell phones and such, even if you're not an EDSer, you can develop issues with your neck. Like, they call it like drop head syndrome or something, where basically you have all these people that are staring at phones like this, and so you're constantly putting your head and your neck in a position that is abnormal. So even if you didn't previously have an issue with your neck, just from you being a person in a country where people have little computers in their pocket that happen to make phone calls, you know, you're going to have your head down a lot. And it's funny because we have click wheels that we use where it's like, keep your head up, you know, times are tough, keep your head up. And that's because, you know, don't be down and stuff like that. But in a very literal sense, don't be looking down all the time, because if you're looking down all the time, you're making it where your head is heavier for your neck to support. And if you don't believe me, then research the drop head stuff, because it's basically like for every degree or so many degrees that your head is down, it's like putting 10 more pounds of weight on your neck to support. So, and that's just like incidental stuff. Like, if people sit there and say source your information, I'll do a generalized searching of sourcing, but basically I did have a lot of lay down periods where my body was just not working properly, and so I research. I read a lot, so I will mispronounce things, and people will get grumpy with me in comments and stuff like that, or they will think that I don't know what I'm talking about, because if I read it, my brain will teach me to say that word in the wrong way because I have read it a bunch. And when I get lectures that are not extremely boring, or even if they are, but they're filled with facts that are relevant to my life, then I will listen to them, and then I will correct how I say whatever the word is. So you just have to bear with me on that. I am just a person that is trying to figure out a way to best live my life without a bunch of weird stuff going on, because my life is always full of weird stuff. So anyways, one of the first things that I saw on this venture, like, it started when I was 19. It started before then with POTS episodes and stuff like that. I probably had a leak a long time ago. I had my first fainting episode when I was in middle school, and I was told that, like, I didn't hold my knees properly, and I had poor circulation, and all these little excuses. So then, as a small child, I was working all the time to try to fix these things that the grown-ups said were wrong with me. And it was very likely that since we had been in a car accident around that time period, that I probably had some type of spinal CSF leak from trauma. But of course, back then, nobody knew what this was. I mean, we're way into the future and people barely know what this is. Even though there's some doctors that have been doing it for like 20 years and they're like, hey, we know what's going on, it's still hard to treat, it's still hard to diagnose, and so you're kind of out here on the wilderness doing your own thing. So, you know, I learned as a child what worked, what didn't work for my specific body, and I made modifications. This has been a long uphill battle. And then after I had my first child at 19, yes, I said 19, I turned 20 the next month. I was young and dumb and got married early, and then by the time that I realized that was a really dumb decision, I eventually was pregnant and tried to make things work as best as I could. You live, you learn, and then you don't get loves. So I was great my whole entire pregnancy. Like, I felt the best that I'd ever felt in my whole entire life. And I was just like rocking it, minus like the first trimester that I didn't know I was pregnant, and I was like in school and working and felt like I had the flu, and then eventually found out that I was pregnant like way into the pregnancy. And so I was a rock star. I was doing everything that I needed to do. Like, I was working doubles. I was just like doing a ton of stuff. And then after I had my daughter, I went back to work, and boom, I had my first migraine, and I was just totally messed up, ended up in the hospital for a couple days, had to have somebody else drive me there because it happened at work. And it was the onset of migraines and everything else. And they basically told me, like, hey, you know, you probably have migraines and this is probably just going to be your life, because like I kept having them. And then my, what I now know are POTS symptoms, started getting like super duper duper bad. And I was like, this is really horrible because I'm really young. So then I went through the rounds of the doctors and they were like, yeah, you have low blood pressure. Yeah, you have a really fast heart rate. Yeah, your symptoms are all over the place, but like, you're young, you're healthy, and you know, when you hit your 30s, like maybe they'll give you something to increase your blood pressure, but like we really just don't know anything about this and you're just gonna have to deal. So I was like, okay, that's not really very helpful. So, you know, long and short of it is I pretty much went through the same thing again. I had my middle daughter like 7 years after, and had 2 epidurals with that one, because I had 1 epidural with my first daughter. And then when I went in to have my second daughter, I did not want an epidural because somehow I just knew that like something was up. Like I felt great until I had my daughter and then like my first daughter. And so I tried really hard not to get an epidural, and then it finally got to a point where I was like, I need an epidural. And they gave me the first one and it didn't work. And then they gave me the second one and it didn't work. And then I basically got to experience having her all natural, but probably with obtaining 2 new CSF leaks, spinal CSF leaks. And I was so bad after that I was like begging the nurses to take my child because I had no energy. I had no anything. As soon as I started sitting upright, my head was just hurting so bad. I also had hyperemesis with that pregnancy. Probably saying it wrong. It's been a while. And so I was nauseous, vomiting. All of my POTS symptoms were so bad. I bought compression pantyhose and I was doubling up on compression pantyhose, trying to be upright, trying not to be so sick. Like it was like POTS on steroids, being pregnant with my daughter and my second daughter. And the after effects of it were just horrific as well. And so like the only thing I need to do is like I just need caffeine. I need to like hydrate, caffeine. I was shooting in the dark. I was showing all the classic symptoms of a CSF leak. Times 2, because they did it twice and neither time worked. And so that was not good. And I just kind of, you know, tried and ended up going to the neurologist because my mom had started talking about like, oh, if you get Botox, that'll probably help with your migraines. Because it wasn't just migraines, it was like sensitivities, it was this, it was that, it was like all these basically feeling like I'm intoxicated symptoms that like just would wax and wane, and I had no idea the correlation to why and how and all this other stuff. And so I had privately paid for Botox for a little while, and then I found out that my insurance would cover it if I went to a neurologist. So I went to a neurologist. I've actually been to a few neurologists, but this neurologist in particular was like, hey, we should do an MRI of your brain, and then like it's on my to-do list and I need to do it at some point. I need to track down that neurologist. But whatever he saw, like he told me I had like spots on my brain or something. I don't know, it's been a long time ago. And so I was like, oh, that's not good. And he was like, and I really think that we need to do a lumbar puncture and to rule out some other stuff. And I was like, okay. So I don't know if like he saw a Chiari thing or he suspected a leak or what he was looking for. And he told me that my results were abnormal, but for the life of me, I can't remember what was abnormal about it. Other than spots in my brain, you need to have an MRI done like every year or every other year to make sure that like you don't have develop worse things. I was so busy at the time. That was pretty much all he had said to me. And then I got Botox. And I also had like, you know, little in between things done that were injections in my neck, which I was not a fan of because it made me feel worse, and life moved on, and that was pretty much it. So to almost bring us up to current time, and you know, tons of doctors in between trying to figure out this, and it's like chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, blah 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 blah. Here's some pain pills. Don't want pain pills. Like that was the age of like everybody gets pain pills. And I'm like, these pain pills make me feel worse. I don't want any more pain pills. Like I don't want to take them. I don't like to drink alcohol. Like I'm very heat intolerant. I don't need anything that's going to make my body feel worse. Like I don't want to be a drugged up person and feel worse than I do right now. What I want is to feel better and to be able to do more things because I like to do things and my body just doesn't like to work properly. Can you help me with that instead of making me like intoxicated medically? And that didn't work. So I just had to figure it out for myself because, you know, I was young, thin, physically fit, perfectly fine, except for all this stuff that was just in my head. But then like they could see that my blood pressure was really low and my blood sugar was low and I was anemic, and like outside of things that just made it seem like I didn't like to eat, they're just like, Bakatas, move on with your life. It's like, okay. So, you know, 9 years after having my daughter and getting Botox and stuff like that every so often with the neurologist, well, I did that for a little while, and then like life happened and I stopped, and then I just started privately paying for it again. So after I had my son, felt like crap again. And it's just like every time I have a baby, I feel so much worse physically. And then it was great because like my OBs were like, are you sure it's not postpartum? I'm like, it's not postpartum. Like I go from being gigantic and pregnant and stressed out because like he was medically complex. We knew that in utero. And so it's like all these doctor's appointments for his stuff, all of these tests for our stuff because to find out about other things for me, almost dying of COVID, heart doing tricks, learning how to be able to like walk again, like all these very extreme things. If anything, I was grateful to be alive. I was excited to not be toting around severe polyhydramnios because like my amniotic fluid levels for him were just like insane. They induced me early because like he was just trying to explode my uterus. Love him so much, but like he was difficult. So I was grateful to be alive. I was happy that he was alive. I was dealing with all of his appointments and trying to keep him alive because like he just kept getting smaller and smaller. And so like if anything, I was a mommy on a mission. I wasn't depressed. I was grateful for my life and existence and for that of my sons. And physically, I was exhausted. Physically, I could not cope. Physically, having to get up every hour and a half because he was like having a newborn that just never got out of the newborn phase. Like he had sleep apnea, he had all these things. And so physically I was not doing well maintaining his schedule. And because of some of his complexities, he couldn't nurse. He was expending more energy trying to consume milk from me than he was actually getting. And so once we realized that, I was pumping all the time and filling bottles, and then we had to fortify and we had to do all these different things. And so it was basically be upright for him and lay down, and those were my only two options. And no, it didn't make me depressed. Like I said, I was in like fighting spirits because I was a mommy on a mission, and my mission was my baby is going to survive and thrive. And once he's more hardy, then we are going to start, you know, having fun, and I will be able to really enjoy, you know, newfound motherhood again because, you know, he was difficult. But he was my baby, and he made me happy every time that like, you know, like once he started increasing from like the second percentile, like he got down to the second percentile, like he was doing really bad. And And it's still really frustrating when I try to explain that to people, and I know I'm doing a random segue from my CSF stuff, but it's very frustrating to be dealing with or to have dealt with something that is very traumatic and scary and makes you really appreciate your dedication that you have to another human being, that which being my son. And when you talk to people about it, they're like, oh, he looks fine. And you're like, he's not. Like, how dare you make that assessment on him? Like, or they downplay and they're like, oh, all babies have sleep issues. No, all babies don't wake up crying in pain and shrieking and have all these things that he has going on. Oh, all babies are a little difficult. No, not all babies basically have a miserable first 16 months of their life where they are struggling to exist, and that their mother has to be completely consumed by their existence and almost get to a point of delirium from sleep deprivation, because you almost get to a point of worrying if you fall asleep for a little while that your child is not going to be awake whenever you wake up. Like, he had a little alarm on him so that whenever he would stop breathing, it would sound, and I would immediately, get him and stuff. So it was hard. Depressed? No. Stressed? Yes. But again, grateful, because we literally almost didn't survive this. And so I put my health at a back burner thing, even though the COVID, like when I almost died of COVID and everything, they told me, like, your heart's doing all these things. Like, I had four different things going on with my heart. And they're like, you really need to see a cardiologist after, you have your son, or before you have your son, or whatever, blah, 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 blah. But, like, my son's life was more important than my stuff. So then eventually, like, my son got better. I mean, he's still not, like, better, like, average child, but I mean, he significantly improved. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to start this whole thing again. So, was able to start getting the pot stuff processed, had a doctor that actually validated care and everything like that. And then I didn't know anything about the CSF leak whenever I first started in with her. The CSF leak didn't come for a little while. So I was going through the motions of getting the POTS diagnosis, going through the motions of finding out what of my heart stuff had resolved, what of my heart stuff was still going on, and how to mitigate and manage everything. And then because my husband was like, hey, look, I'm tired of you paying out of pocket for Botox. You're really bad about doing it because you're cheap. And then, like, I see you suffer. So, like, go to a neurologist since you're doing all the cardiology stuff and the workup for that. And I was like, okay. So went to neurologist for that, explained the stuff. I was like, hey, I'm supposed to have imaging of my brain. I haven't really done that since, like, that first one time. So she's like, okay. So then we did an MRI of my brain, and she's like, I don't see anything here that is related to your headaches, but since you've been on all of these different medications and you've had Botox in the past, we're going to push it through with insurance and we'll start scheduling you for Botox. And I was like, cool beans. And then I just, like, I don't know, I had been looking at, like, my blood work and stuff like that, because now that I knew so much more about the medical field because of my son, I was in a better capacity to realize that, like, you have to stay on top of doctors for certain things, especially, like, rare things. So when and also the transparency of my chart with Johns Hopkins, which is why I really like big hospitals, because I like having access to all of my records. So I went through and I looked at my MRI stuff for my brain, and it was talking about how my cerebellar tonsils were ectopic, and then it had measurements, and I was like, oh, no, that one didn't have measurements. Measurements came later. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, that's abnormal. What does that mean? And it's like, no, you have a Chiari malformation. Like, I researched it, and I was like, oh. And so then I'm like, hey, neurologist, my chart messages like, Chiari malformation. She's like, no, it doesn't meet the diagnostic criteria. It's not related to your headaches, blah, 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 blah. And so that led to like Facebook groups and information and then lectures, like watching lectures, reading papers, realizing, holy crap, like this is like the majority of my symptoms. What if it's that like my stuff is because my brain is messed up? Which sounds so bad. It's like, oh, and then it's like brain surgery is what you need. You need decompression brain surgery, and then like you can have like this zipper stuff with your head, and like you can end up with a scar like this big and like all this stuff. And I'm like, oh gosh, but then that'll make my symptoms so much better. So then I was like, you know what? I really don't want a ginormous scar, but like my symptoms are really bad and I'm way worse because I just had a baby, and like for some reason every time I have a baby I get like really messed up. And I'm so mad at myself because I didn't even think about the fact of like the confirmed CSF leak, where they were like, I did CSF leak because after the MRI with the first neurologist, or whatever number he was, neurologist, I got a CSF leak and I couldn't get upright for days. And then because it was like a Thursday and then Friday, like they said wait 24 to 48 hours, and then I had to wait the weekend, and then I called on Monday and they're like, oh, you have a CSF leak. You could have had a blood patch, but it needed to be done within the first 48 hours. Like just drink a bunch of caffeine and have some bed rest and then you'll be okay. And so then like I was suffering all over again. And so like I just didn't make that correlation. And I just got really mad about it. So I just kept researching the Chiari thing because I was like, okay, that's got to be the stuff. And then some of the stuff for Chiari can be comorbids of POTS. So I'm like, well, what if the Chiari is causing the POTS, and then like all this other stuff. So there's a lot of research there, and then finding out that like there's a doctor that specifically treats like people like me, and then like you have to go through all these hoops, which is Dr. Henderson. So then I started like just absorbing any literature, any seminars, anything that he had, because I'm like, I really don't want literal brain surgery, but I want to feel better, and I will do whatever I need to do because like I'm just declining again. And so then I joined some of the Chiari groups. They reinforced the whole thing with, you know, you have a Chiari malformation, you know, you need to find one of these very specific doctors. And it was just a whole bunch of networking, researching, all that good stuff. And so then this one lady, and I want to be this one lady for people. Man, I'm 27 minutes in. This one lady was like, have you had epidurals? Have you heard of an acquired Chiari from a CSF leak? I was like, what is that? And then I started like honing in on researching that. And then I was like, holy crap. Because basically if you have a CSF leak long enough or severe enough or whatever, it can create like the brain sagging, or Chiari malformation, or cerebellar ectopia, or cerebellar descent. Like they have so many different names for these. Basically, like your brain is trying to like it starts getting sucked down into your skull, and it creates issues because like why wouldn't it? It's moving and it's your brain. It's kind of essential. So then I start going back into Henderson's stuff, Dr. Henderson's stuff, and I'm like, what is this? And then he specifically outlays it in his seminars, and he's like, hey, you have all this stuff, like, you know, if you want to see me, then you really need to, you know, get evaluated, excuse me, for a CSF leak. And like, these are the steps that you need to do before we do a decompression or whatever, because you can have a fusion thing. He talks about CCI. So then I'm like, hey, I can schedule something with my ortho. So I schedule something with my ortho. And then like some lady during the pregnancy time period with my son was like, oh, you don't have EDS, you don't have anything. So I went into my ortho and I was like, hey, I got these joint problems, blah, blah, blah. You know, torn rotator cuff, all this stuff. By the way, can you evaluate and possibly diagnose me with CCI, craniocervical instability, and EDS again? And so he did. I mean, he made me do the evaluations and everything, the bite and scale. And then he was like, okay, do the head stuff. And so my head super extends both ways, side to side. I can push it like way past my shoulder, both sides. The left side is easier than the right side. And I can, at that point, I could basically get the back of my head to touch the back, like my back. And he got all excited during these things. He's like, oh, that is so cool, but don't do that ever again. And you know, the flexion in the front and everything like that. He's like, yeah, you totally have CCI and you totally have EDS, and like, you're super cool, and you got to keep me updated with your like medical story. And I'm like, okay, cool. So he was all excited and nice. And I got more diagnoses to add to my ever expanding list of things that are wrong with Michelle Fixit. So then I was doing a lot of research with Dr. Henderson and his lectures and all this other stuff. And then he talked about this. Oh gosh, I have two of these. Trying to get my light back again. The Aspen Vista collar. And so I bought it because he was like, you know, if you're looking into fusion, if you have CCI, blah, 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 instability, fusion is like big, scary. You don't want to do it unless you absolutely have to. You should try the collar first. And I was like, okay, well, now I have that. So I guess I better buy this stupid collar. So I bought it, and then it kind of just like got tossed around my house all over the place. And my husband's like, look, you bought that thing, and like, you're cheap, and like, you need to start using it. And because I've had a very sordid past, this thing on my neck, the first few times, triggered PTSD for me. And so I did not like it, and I was very afraid of it, and it really bothered me. But then my husband kept saying, like, you paid monies for this. You need to use it. You are cheap. Use your thing, because you don't want to have like some scary surgery. And I was like, okay. And then because of the whole scary surgery, like I wrote a book. You know, it's like another random segue. I wrote a book on my son's bilateral clubfoot thing. And basically, you know, there was a doctor, Dr. Ponzetti, that discovered a long time before the rest of the doctors did that instead of having scary surgeries where you basically took the whole entire foot and ankle apart for these poor clubfoot children, a majorly invasive surgery that you could completely resolve clubfoot with extremely amazing success rates by nice casting, a quick clip, which was an in-office procedure to alleviate an overly tight Achilles tendon, and then do boots and bars, which I have over there. And boots and bars to maintain hyperflexion, so that while they're sleeping, their feet are in this position so that they don't need a scary surgery. And I have the cast and everything too. It's another video that I'm like long overdue with doing. But anyways, so I was like, you know what, basically maybe this collar is going to be like my boots and bars. So I wore it during the day. I really hated it. I was like, if this is what fusion surgery is going to be like, I really don't want this. And then I feel like it was Henderson in one of his lectures. It was like, you know, you can sleep in it, this and that. And then I found other different little people that had been through partial stuff. And the trend that I see is that like you have these creators or these people that start to talk about their medical venture, and then like once they're fixed or they're close enough or they get bored or whatever, they lose interest in their channel. And so then they have an audience that finds them years later and they're not responding. And so I'm trying to be like the person that will respond. So anyways, started wearing it during the day, started testing, trying to take it in naps or wear it in naps and stuff like that. And then eventually got up to the point where I would wear that bad boy like every night to go to sleep. And I realized that because my natural position to sleep is like putting my head down, like I go in whenever I'm asleep, similar to how clubfoot child their feet will want to go in and up back to their normal, the normal way that they were when they were developing in utero and when they were born. And so for me, I got to a point where I was wearing it every night, and then it's like instinctually, like once you've had it for so long or you've been wearing it for so long, instinctually you just kind of know when you don't need to wear it. And then other times, like I can't go to sleep, And then I'm like, I need my collar. And then I'll put my collar on, and it's almost like a pacifier where it settles me down, and it makes it where like my neck just feels so good once I put it on. I'm like, okay. Because when you're wearing it at night, you're strengthening different areas of your neck, and you're relearning that, like, whether it's been because of EDS or it's been because you are looking down at your phone like this, that your position is not the natural position that your body wants to be in. And so now that I know all of that, when I'm walking around, I see so many people that have like their heads are just like permanently down. I'm like, oh, your posture is so terrible. And as Americans in general, we have terrible posture. Like, other countries make fun of us because like we stick out in a crowd because our posture is so bad. Like, I've seen videos about how, like, if you're going to be an undercover secret agent or whatever, not like, you know, TV or whatever, but like the first thing that they have to train out of their people before they start training them to be able to do these different missions is they have to train out the American lean or the American posture, because we lean. And so that all tells me that like we got some posture problems. So like, even if you don't have EDS, get a collar, wear it, and if it helps you, it helps you. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I didn't sell it to you. I'm not making any money off of saying, hey, get this thing. I might make a commission, like, if I post links sometimes, but like, it's like a couple pennies, so it's not really, like, it's not worth me trying to sell it to you. So anyways, that's one of my things that I did, is I have the collar. I wear that when I need it. But again, I wore it a bunch during the day, which is extremely annoying, similar to how like wearing these during the day for most children would annoy the crap out of them, and they would be more tolerant of them at night. My son is special. He is more tolerant of wearing boots and bars or his new AFOs, which let him walk around. He's good with that during the day, but when he sleeps, he has like other things going on, and so he will scream all night if he has those things on. Mommy, on the other hand, prefers to wear her neck brace at nighttime. But again, I don't have to wear it all the time. But like, if I got in a car accident, I got rear-ended, that thing, I went from wearing it like once a week to wearing it all the time, because that impact really messed up my neck, and really, like, for a while I was messed up, and so that was extremely useful. And I guess I can do a separate video for it, with how to acclimate yourself to it and get used to it and not be bothered by it and stuff like that. So that's one of the big things that I did. Another thing that I did was I have two children. One's homeschooled, one's medically complex. So it's kind of hard to do this one. But basically, I learned my lay down period to be able to be upright as long as possible, and really tried to figure out where and how my symptoms were trying to give me indications of where I was with being high or low with pressure. Because when I had my tilt test done, because they made me stay upright so much longer than I normally would have done, I learned that I get flashers and floaters when I get to a certain point. If I'm upright for a certain amount of time, like, they pushed me to a point of like I should have passed out, but I didn't, and I was just like going back and forth. That's how I learned that I go back and forth. I knew a little bit of that from the heart monitor I had on, but I didn't know that concretely until the tilt table test. So I get flashers and floaters. I have auditory involvement. I have throat involvement. I'll have like head involvement, or I get tingly, or I'll get burning sensations. That some of the dysautonomia is starting to kick in. Embarrassingly, I will get really burpy. I can't make myself burp. I've just never been able to do that. But in the tilt table test, I had a time period where normally I would have associated that stuff with being like a celiac thing, because as the time period lengthened, it's like I went through all of my symptoms, and since they said during it, you know, if you are experiencing anything besides just being normal, let us know so that we can add it in. So all of a sudden, my hearing went out, and then I just kept burping. Like, it was involuntary. And then I was very gassy on the other end. And so it was this weird thing where I guess somewhere in my survival mode of my body, trying to, because I hadn't had anything to eat or drink, so like I don't know, I was nauseous, and then I was burping a bunch, and then I was farting a bunch, and like I didn't have anything to expend on either end, but like that time period was interesting. And I was told that that's part of my dysautonomia stuff. And then, you know, of course, uh like just neurological pain, and there was a whole bunch of stuff, but those are the ones that just like really stuck in me. I was like, okay, so if I get burpy, that means that I'm like really pushing myself. So cervical collar, I've been upright for a little while, so like cognitive function's starting to decline. I'm trying to like play it off like it's not, because like even though I'm super comfy at this point with making videos on the whim, like I'm sure people are going to be like, why do you have Slim Jims by your bed? Because I like Slim Jims. Because my husband says that I eat like a teenager. But I also eat healthy stuff, but like it's whatever. I let my body decide what I need to do. And then the pot's there because there are some like fake plants that I'm going to stick around the property. And then those are the two things for the wreaths, because I have 2 wreaths that I made because I have a property that I have a power supply issue at, and I don't want anyone to break into it. So since the neighbor told me that like supposedly somebody was trying to break into it, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna throw some wreaths on it so that way it looks more lived in, so nobody will like mess with it. Random information that would normally make it where I'm not gonna release this video. But what have you done? Cervical collar, lay down periods. I was taking sodium pills, but like the sodium pills that I was like, they were the ones that my cardiologist recommended. They're also the ones that Henderson recommended. And for some reason, for me, if I don't have caffeine with my sodium, like it messes me up. I don't know what the thing is, because like I kicked the caffeine out. That's a whole other video. And then I upped my sodium because that's what the cardiologist and the neurologist told me to do before I was really into this whole thing. Like I'm basically like a weird little experiment. And now I'm taking biotin because I have a biotinase deficiency, or a carrier of it, but then like my biotinase levels are super duper low. I don't know. I have weird stuff. So bear with me for a moment. I apologize too, because I know people, I don't like hearing people eat, so it's like a huge big thing for me. I have a lot of like sensory issues. Yes, I've been diagnosed as an Aspie cat before you're even wondering. I'm neurospicy. So I tried the sodium things, and then a month or so ago, I started making my own salt pills. I'm like the ultimate DIYer. It's like, you tell me what the problem is, I'm gonna find a way to fix it. So, self-disclosure, I am not a doctor. I am just a person that's making like random videos. So I now make my own pills. Because, see, I can make a video on it. So basically, I'm like a get to the chase, let's fix this thing with as the least amount of damage possible. So being that I couldn't take the sodium pills, and couldn't keep, like, because I am a caffeine dependent person, and so that's part of my CSF stuff, because caffeine, if you didn't know, stimulates the, I think it's colloidal nexus. It's inside your brain. I referenced him as being like the little guy inside of your brain in a different video. But I think it's called, I know how to spell it, but I've read it a bunch of times. Colloidal nexus, I think. I don't know. People say it fast, and so if I'm mispronouncing it, I really don't care at this point. But basically, that little guy gets stimulated by nicotine, and so if you have a vapey problem, or an electronic smoky stick problem, or a regular analog smoky stick, then like that might be part of it too. Because nicotine stimulates the production of CSF, and so does caffeine. And salt makes it stick. Because your cerebrospinal fluid it's like salts, a little bit of protein, glucose, and fluid, essentially. So it's like salt, sugar, fluid. It's energy supply. So what I did in my uniqueness, that is me, is I was like, well, if I just get like maybe something in the sodium pills that my body just doesn't like, because like I couldn't get up. I couldn't get upright. Like I tried and I needed caffeine with it and it just didn't work. And then I have hyponatremia, which is when you have super low sodium levels, and it took a while to figure that out because, like, until you start having all of your records in one place, people are just going to assume when they see that your sodium levels are super below normal limits. If they only see you the one time, they're going to be like, oh, maybe they were overly hydrated that day. But then, like, if they see that, like, over the course of like 2 years, your sodium levels are really low. Like my cardiologist was like, you need to be on salt pills. Like you adding salt to your food is not going to touch these numbers. Like this is bad. Brain swelling, brain edema, it's a thing. And like I didn't really listen, but then I did have an episode where like brain swelling and edema was a thing, and like your brain can go all over the place, and like it's just really not good. And then like I heard that conversation in my head after that was starting to resolve, and I was like, oh man, that's a big problem. Because I talked to her about it after the fact, and she was like, you dehydrate on a cellular molecular level if you don't have the electrolytes, and then you have like the hyponatremia and you add that in, and so like your brain would have just been like ridiculously big but in a bad way. I was like, okay, thank you. So I played with my pills, or I played with these pills. I didn't care if they're vegan or not. I just cared that they didn't have a bunch of weird stuff in them. I purchased vegan empty pill capsules. And so in each one of these little guys is, oh yeah, and I experimented, so these pills are not the same. So I don't care if you guys think I'm a weirdo. There are people that believe all kinds of things at different points, and like people are being made fun of for people have issues with people because of the color of their skin or their sex or their sexual orientation, or the fact that like they don't trust doctors at all, or the fact that like they're a different religion. There's always going to be somebody to make fun of somebody else. There's always going to be someone that hates somebody else. There's always going to be someone that wants to attack someone for whatever reason. And I'm trying not to be an attacker unless you're doing something that's just like absolutely morally wrong. I try to be as non-judgmental as possible, but for some reason I've been very anxiety ridden about like sharing certain pieces, and now I'm starting to find out there are people that might need a little bit of help. And if they take one piece of my 10 pieces of information and they think I'm a cuckoo bird on 9 out of 10 things, but one thing helped, I don't care. It's not going to impact my life. I'm just talking to a screen. I mean, actually, I'm done with my eyelashes, so like now it's like you guys are kind of infringing upon my time, but like make fun of me if you'd want to. I don't care. But basically, this one, I ground up the salt because I figured that would be a great idea for like packing these things. And it wasn't. I kind of messed stuff up. This one is just like the salt crystals and stuff, so you should be able to see that a little bit better. Yeah, I know. My nails are starting to pull. I gotta like redo them. Yes, I do my own nails. Like I'm a huge DIYer. So in each one of these pills, because I'm hypoglycemic, I put a teeny tiny little bit of cane sugar, so it's like the purest sugar that I could find. And then I have pink Himalayan salt is also in there because that is like 96-97% sodium. I would have thought like 100% sodium, but it's not. My dad is like super into Celtic salt right now. It's like really trendy, evidently, and he's like trendy-ish, but he wants to make it seem like he's not. But it is. Dad, it's trendy to be into Celtic salt right now. So I have Celtic salt, but Celtic salt only has like 36% or something sodium rate, and and then caffeine. So I have caffeine pills, and so basically my current rate that works for me, because like I would make a couple pills and then I would test them throughout the day because I did the math on it. It was a lot of salt that I needed, and there's a lot more salt than I was going to be consuming, and I was trying to consume a lot of salt. And then I even had my husband like adding salt into like sodas and stuff or tea or whatever, and then it was just like I really like to drink fluids, and then like when you start adding stuff into fluids that shouldn't be there, it was not good. So now I just do my salt pills well, my salt and extras pills, and they're working really well. And I think the most recent batch of these that I'm very fond of, because I would change it up a little bit. And it's like, nope, I'm a little too, like, I don't know. I tread carefully with the caffeine piece, because like if I have too much caffeine, then like my heart's already like fast rate because of the low blood pressure. So my most recent one is, I think I'm doing 3 tablespoons of Celtic salt, 9 tablespoons of Himalayan salt, 3 tablespoons of cane sugar, like natural cane sugar, and then 11 caffeine pills. And I mix that all together, and then I put them into the little pill container. And I probably could do, and I know that sounds like a lot, but I mean, I make a ton of these pills at one time, because I have to have a lot of them. And I probably next week will go in and get a blood test done to see if my sodium levels were higher, because I had a blood test done like a month ago, and I thought that with all, and that's when I really started messing with like these things, like a month, 2 months ago, maybe 2 months ago, because I've been doing the salt pills for a little while now. And I got so mad because I thought that my sodium levels were going to be like off the charts and really high, because I was taking sodium everywhere I could find it. And as it turns out, my sodium levels were exactly the same. And I was making a huge effort. I was making a massive effort to eat as much salt as possible, add salt into drinks. I only drink things that have, or at that point, I was only drinking things that had salt and everything in there. And so now that it's been like a month and a half, maybe, of taking these guys, because again, I tried and like I've played with the formula. And now that I have them, I'm hoping that I will finally get to a point of having normal sodium levels, because my sodium levels have never been normal. To my recollection, because I wasn't always like checking my blood tests and everything before. It's only been recently that I've actually started reading every single report. I just was trusting my doctors, which was a bad decision. I bet she's taking pills with the swallowy part of it. But anyways, I have issues with trusting doctors. Found something else I can do. I can put moisturizer on my face, which I'm really bad about doing. So I have really bad problems with trusting doctors, because if I would have actually read or looked at any of my own stuff, then I would have known a long time ago that these things were going on. And if I wouldn't have read that report from a neurologist with the MRI, wouldn't have found out about the QRA malformation, wouldn't have found out about the leak. Like, so much of this is stuff that I've had to just like find and figure out along the way. And then the really frustrating thing about it has been that I have some people in my life that are just like, oh, you have so many medical problems, like you're dying, I'm worried about you. And I'm like, I'm not dying, but my quality of life is crap. And then I have other people that basically act like I'm a huge hypochondriac, because outwardly I look like I should be able to do everything, and I'm quote unquote healthy. And they don't understand that, like, whereas a normal person just goes to the beach just to have fun, for me, I'm going to worry about how hot it is. I'm going to worry about how long I'm in the sun, not because of sun burning or sun tanning or anything like that, but because I'm going to sweat and I'm going to feel like poop. And then I'm going to become a mean person, because my body's going to be in survival mode. So I'm going to become very edgy, very mean. And I personally don't like being an edgy, mean person. I like being a happy, pleasant person. And then I'm going to get to a point where The girls are upset about something. And then I'm going to get to a point where I feel like I'm going to faint, which is going to make all of my grumpy and scared stuff even worse. I'm not going to be able to properly socialize with people. And being the neurospicy person that I am, it's like, okay, well, that's just like selective mutism. And as it turns out, it's not. It's that as my brain starts going further and further down, it starts impacting my ability to speak and a bunch of other things. And I found that out during my time period of my son having seizures, because I pushed myself for so long that I got to a point where I couldn't speak. And it was scary, because if it would have been anyone else, I would have laid down, I would have rested, I would have had something happen, I would have done something. But when your son is having seizures and you have to bring him to doctors and everything is so scary, you're going to not take care of yourself. And so I found out that eventually, if you push yourself long enough, you will lose your ability to speak. And it eventually comes back, but I learned a lot about a lot during his seizure episode. So yeah, those are the things that I've done. As far as like triaging myself, being that I had knowledge and things like that, because if I wouldn't have known about the CSF leaks and the Chiari malformation and the this and the that and what causes these different things, I'm a very mechanical person by nature. So if there's water on the floor, the water came from somewhere. Where's the leak? And you know, if a pipe is overflowing, there's a clog somewhere. Very common sense things for me. Same with vehicles, alternators, carburetors, fuel injection systems, transmissions, how those different little things work. And so if you have one issue with one part, then it can manifest in a different area. But because it works in this very specific way, that's why it's manifesting seemingly unrelated to another issue. And that's how I've treated all of this. It's like, what's the core issue? The core issue is this. The core issue is that. And again, these videos always end up being rambling sessions, but that's just what it is. Because it would take a few hours out of my day to make a video that I may make 10 cents off of. Not that I'm saying that, like, you know, I have to make money off of YouTube, but I'm saying that, like, I have other things that, like, I have a family, I have houses that I work on, I have things that, like, are a little bit more pressing, as much as I really want to help people, which is why I have the videos, so that it's a faster rate of exchange. Because if somebody asks me this question again in the future, I'll be able to send over the video and hopefully enlighten them a little bit. Even though now it's like at 57 minutes. So that was stuff that I personally used to triage myself. The collar, I think, is immeasurably, and as you can see, like, I've been upright too long, has immeasurably helped my life. The salt / sugar / a little bit of caffeine pills have helped immensely. I found out recently, very recently, that I actually, as much as it sounds like that's a lot of caffeine in the pills, my normal caffeine intake is like 250 to 300, and it turns out that, like, most Americans have that in like a drink. I wasn't aware. So now I'm going to work on exactly how much caffeine I have, and figuring that out. The lay down periods has helped immeasurably. I have had a blood patch, because at this point I've had a CT myelogram done. Skipping ahead, I apologize for that. So once I was mitigating symptoms, trying to find a CSF leak doctor, because I was 98% sure that I had one. And when I say 98%, I mean that is a very factual thing. Like, I don't throw numbers around, because I'm very data driven, research driven, evidence driven, mechanical thought process by nature. So I was 98% sure that I had a CSF leak. It turned out that the two really big CSF leak specific doctors, like the POTS and CSF leak doctor, would be Dr. Carroll. He's the one trying to beat the drum on everything. And then there's a Dr. S. I do not know how to say his name. I do not know how to he has a very complicated last name. But he's at Cedars-Sinai, and then Dr. Carroll is at Stanford. And then Dr. Henderson was like the me doctor that I really wanted to see. But then he really outlaid all the different things that he wanted done before seeing a patient. And then, and I have contacted his office a couple times, and that was reiterated to me upon intake and potentially scheduling an appointment, and by his office manager. So that's why I was kind of doing my homework and making sure that I went through all the routes before I even saw him, because like that's supposed to be his protocol. I'm finding out now that like he's seeing people without that protocol happening, so I'm kind of confused. But I'm really happy with where I am on my adventure. I don't want to call it a journey because like people poke at that. I'm very happy with where I'm at with my adventure with my CSF leak stuff. Because I was able to find a really good doctor. He's not the best, no offense to him at all. But he's basically like, you know, patient quality care. Like when I went in, I saw him, he was like, you know, we can do a blind blood patch. They're not as speech is getting impacted. They're not as successful, but we could go that route, or we can go the imaging route, because most people don't end up with me and saying that, you know, they have a CSF leak if they don't. And so if you've been waiting this long, then I'm here to treat and make this process easier for you. So I was given the reins of my own medical treatment, which I appreciated. So I was like, I would rather try to do some of the imaging first. At that moment, I was not aware of the burn score. He let me know about the burn score. And so I did have an MRA done to get a burn score, which then creates a number that tells you the likelihood of you having a CSF leak. Because until they find an actual leak, they can't say, you know, like you absolutely have one. But my doctor was like, you know, you seem like you definitely have one. And so my burn score indicated that I had a leak. One of the things that I heavily recommend if you are in the beginning stages of this and you haven't had an MRA that will be quantifying a burn score is I asked him if he wanted me to be high pressure or low pressure. He told me he wanted me to be low pressure because then it's going to show what's going on with your brain whenever you're in a hypotension area. So that is what I did. I stayed upright way longer than I should have. I did not use my tips and tricks. I did not, and he said, don't use any of your things that you would normally use, you know, my caffeine, my this, my that. He wanted to see what I was like as a baseline. And unfortunately, he wanted me to not do that for a few days. I did not follow directions on that because like I have 2 children and I have a life and I need to be able to do things and I need to be upright, because if without these things in place, I cannot be upright without being hazardous. So I didn't really do my things for like 12 hours, maybe pushing 24. But I did push myself with being upright. I made it where I had an afternoon appointment. I spent most of my day upright. I was hazardous whenever I finally went in there. And I figured that I would have a ridiculously high burn score. Well, then the machine that I was in broke, and so I was laying down for about 3.5 hours. And as you lay down, your CSF fluid, your pressures increase, your CSF, your colloidal nexus starts producing more CSF, and so it's going to skew some of those results. So even with me laying down for 3.5 hours, I still had a score that said, this lady probably has a big leak, or leaks. A bunch of small ones or a big one. So I was very nervous because it was like, as I was laying there and then they finally told me I was broken, I was like, this is going to totally mess up my thing. Still scored. So he was like, wow, if you were laying down for 3.5 hours and you have this score, like this would have been a lot worse score. Like you definitely have a leak. And I was like, cool beans. And so then what? We had the appointment, we talked about the leak. Oh, yeah, that's it. We didn't have an in-between because I was like, wait a sec, I'm missing a piece. So and it took a while because he only wanted to get that done at like a certain place. So it took like 3-4 months to be able to get that schedule or to get that on the books. Like that's how far out my appointment was. And then when I went in for my follow-up, like right before my follow-up appointment, his office called and was like, hey, given your results, he wants to schedule you for a CT myelogram. And I was like, eek, I really don't know if I want to do that because like I'm scared of getting a new leak and that's going to be really bad. And I'm like sort of almost functional, but not really. But like I don't want to lose any traction. And so I was like, okay, we'll schedule it and then I'll maintain my appointment with him and I'll talk to him. And he was like, hey, I really feel like it would be really good, but like if you're hesitant, then like you don't have to do it. But like it is one of the better ways to find the leaking stuff. And so he's like, I can always blind blood patch you, but like my dad was in town, so I knew that my husband would have like an extra set of hands for the children. Knew that it would mean 2 adults instead of just everything falling on my husband. So I was like, you know what, it makes sense. Let's just go ahead and get this done. And of course, I did it. And then I either made one of my other leaks worse, or I developed a whole new leak per the doctor. That's exactly what she said. And so had it done on a Thursday. Friday, like they told me that I should be okay after 24 to 48 hours. So Friday, I was like, all right, I still feel horrible. I can't be upright. I did all the stuff I was supposed to do. I remained flat. I was on bed rest. Remained flat on the way from the hospital to the house. Did every single thing that I was supposed to do, and still I was leaking profusely. And like that really reinforced, like knowing that that was a leak, super, super, super reinforced that I was leaking after each one of my children and after the lumbar puncture with the confirmed CSF leak. But like that, we're talking like the confirmed CSF leak was in 2013, if not 2014. So that's been years ago versus very real right now CSF active leak. And I was like, man, this is why I don't like having children. This is why. And so I was told 24 to 48 hours, I could feel poopy. I didn't know if poopy just meant, how bad I was. And then like eventually like a normal person will start to feel better. It didn't happen. So Saturday I called multiple times, could not get a hold of a doctor. Sunday I called multiple times. My husband called, and then I eventually, because I got really professionally angry on the phone because I was suffering and I could not be upright, then I finally had a doctor call me back and was informed that they don't do blood patches on the weekend. So I'd have to wait until Monday. And then it was a whole thing to get up there and be laying down and then suffering and everything else. And then as soon as I got the blood patch, it was miraculous. And I felt like a deflated balloon that had finally became inflated. I cannot better explain that. It was amazing. 10 out of 10, recommend. It was horrible with the needles and the lidocaine and all the owies that were part of it, and how bad I had to get to the point of getting the blood patch. But I have followed all the protocol and everything. I will have a protocol video that comes out, and basically I cannot express it more than I felt like a balloon that was finally being inflated. And then I almost felt like I was going to be overinflated and I was scared. But then she was like, I'm done. And since that point, with using abdominal binders, with really paying attention, I did get to experience confirmed intracranial hypertension, because since I leak so fast to compensate for my leak, I was laying down, I was doing the bed rest and everything, but then I did get to a point where I experienced the rebound pressure that I've read so much about. In the event that you have rebound intracranial hypertension from a CSF leak, blood patch. I know it sounds cuckoo bird, but because I've experimented on myself so much, vasodilation comes with heat. So when I personally experienced it, I was walking around a bunch. but not like heavy impact because I didn't want to like mess up my blood patch and have it like spring a leak or blow or whatever you want to call it. So I could only do so much of that, and that did help. Activity did help. Being upright, of course, helped. And then I was like, okay, I can't do anything else besides this because I don't want to blow my blood patch. But then I feel like if I have too much intracranial hypertension, rebound pressure, all this stuff, then I might rupture or I might blow it that way. So I decided to do what should mechanically work, which is start vasodilation. So I ran a super hot bath because even though I knew that I couldn't get into said bath, I knew that my feet could. And so basically I overheated my feet as much as I could, and I like steamed up the bathroom, and it started to subside. And then I started to feel like lower pressure. And whether that's just like a placebo effect or not, it worked for me. And I stayed in there for long enough to feel like I was starting to have like a lower amount of CSF fluid. And then I tested out, came in here, laid down, and as soon as I laid down, boom, got more pressure. Head started to hurt, and I was like, okay, this is very obnoxious, being the opposite of my normal problem. But for me, the intracranial hypertension or the rebound pressure, it really only impacted my hearing, and I don't really think I had any other things. I felt like I needed to do a lot. Like I felt very anxious for no reason, and I had hearing issues. And visually, I did start to get to a point where I lost some of my peripheral. So I was kind of familiar with that beforehand. But it was mainly just pain and that, and then just feeling like I was going to explode. I don't know how to better explain that. Like I knew cognitively I wasn't going to explode, but I felt very pressurized. And so went back into the bathroom, did the same thing again with the bathtub. And rinsed and repeated a couple times, and then eventually was able to go to sleep, which was great. But my dogs are going crazy because they hear me in here. But yeah, that's what I've done. I've been to doctors. I don't think I'm going to do another CT myelogram. I'm very apprehensive about that. And I mean, I might, if I can have a guaranteed patch within a standard amount of time instead of suffering for 5 days like I did, that would be fine. But that's what I've done. What have you done? Where are you in this medical adventure? Let's start coining medical adventures instead of medical journeys. So a journey is like a path and you're going there. An adventure, it's like up and down and all around, and I don't know. But maybe nobody's gonna watch it. Like so far I've only had like 65 or 70 people watch the other video, and then posted like a month ago. I don't know. I don't care. Because sometimes the video blows up like a few years later, and at least I'm getting the information out, which is doing a teeny tiny bit of the framework for trying to help people. And that is better than nothing. So I am going to take a moment to review my phone and see if there's any other random stuff that I should have talked about with you guys instead of just rambling, which is what I do. And I'll pause you to be courteous, and then we will see if there's other stuff that I need to add to this. Okay, so I found something on here. So it's talking about like the collar and the prospect of you're not supposed to wear the collar without a physical therapist or anything like that. And like from the lectures and everything else that I've seen, he highly recommends it as a way to be able to figure out, as in Dr. Henderson in one of his lectures, or several of his lectures, when he recommends the neck collar, to my recollection, he doesn't talk about needing a physical therapist to do that. It's not a prescription-based collar. It's supposed to imitate how after a fusion you will be, because when you have a fusion, it's going to be fusing and putting in, rods, pins, hardware, if you will, to connect two of your vertebrae or multiple of your vertebrae. And so the collar is supposed to imitate that rigidness, because like without the collar I have full range. With the collar I am stuck in a certain position. So after a fusion surgery I would be stuck in a certain position. I would be unable to lean down or move forward. So it's kind of a scary thing. So I strongly believe that if you can get one of these handy dandy collars, that you do, and if you have one, I heavily recommend that you utilize it, because I at current time would not want to be stuck in this position all the time. I would not want to be in this position all the time. I look funny when I'm in it. When my dad saw me in it, he looked at me like I was like super broken, but it is, like I said, it's like a little pacifier. It works really well. When I need it, I wear it. When I don't need it, I don't wear it. But to have that as a permanent fixture, and then the decompression surgery for Chiari malformation is also a super scary thing. Now that I've been able to mitigate and make my symptoms a lot better through the self-management with laying down salt, caffeine, hydration, all of those things, I think it's much more worthwhile to try to go through the CSF leak venture. In the exchange that I had with the lady, it seems like maybe she thinks that she's a cranial leaker, because you can have cranial leaks where you're leaking your cerebral spinal fluid through your nose or an eye orbit, or any type of damage here. I mean, you can have traumatic ones, so you can leak out your ears, you can have different areas that you're leaking, but you have cranial leaks and then you have spinal leaks. And spinal leaks can be from epidurals, traumatic injury. EDSers have a higher likelihood of having a spontaneous leak. And I kind of think that, maybe it could be that we, maybe we're a little bit more pressurized sometimes, and because all of our things are more stretchy, like we just, like, one of our areas gives way. Or if you have, like, if you're keeping your head down and you're doing stuff that you're not supposed to be doing, then you can create a narrowing of your spinal cord, which could create intracranial hypertension, or just hypertension with your cerebral spinal fluid to begin with. So be really curious on getting a burn score and the likelihood of having a CSF leak before having a majorly invasive surgery. And I can only equate it to club feet versus, like, club feet surgeries beforehand versus club feet surgery, or like not having club feet surgery, but casting and then boots and bars, where if that system works, it works. Because they used to tear the feet completely apart and then basically rebuild them, and then you create a lifelong issue and a debilitating disability, and pre-arthritic issues and scarring issues and a whole bunch of stuff. Because as much as I strongly believe in surgical intervention when deemed absolutely necessary, and then electively, like if you have something that you don't like about yourself as a person, like some people buy a fancy new car and some people, get a nose job, and I don't have an issue either way, as long as it doesn't affect the functionality of your body. But having a fusion is definitely a permanent, lifelong decision, and it will make it where you are no longer able to look, like you're going to get a rigidness after that surgery. And then the decompressions, being that I'm on so many of the different Chiari malformation or CSF leak groups and all this other stuff, and I've been observing their stories, I would be very resistant to have anything like that done, because there's a lot of people that need additional surgeries after the fact. And as desperate as I was whenever I first started in on this medical adventure, I do not regret at all not jumping into a decompression surgery and ending up with a gigantic scar, or even going to, there's a couple people that do like the minimally invasive one, which is still very invasive, and you end up with a scar that's like this big, because you're messing with the dura, you're messing with a lot of things, and you're increasing your risk of developing another CSF leak. So I would definitely try to hit the smaller stuff before the big wham stuff, and that's also from my mentality as being a fixer, is like, I would rather try to fix a couple, like if my alternator goes out on my Trailblazer, I'm going to get a new alternator. I'm not going to get a new Trailblazer. So that's my equation for that. Hopefully that works. Or if my transmission starts to seem a little sluggish, I'm not going to run out and buy a new transmission. I'm going to check and possibly change out the transmission solenoids. I'm going to check and change the transmission filter, and then a gasket as well. And then I'm going to put more fluid in. But I'm never going to do a flush on the transmission, because then if there's anything that's in there, it might kind of gunk it up and mess it up even faster. And so hopefully that kind of makes sense, where it's don't get a whole new transmission when it's a solenoid. Look at your little stuff. And then another thing just to add in is like random information, and then I'm going to let you guys go because this video is way too long. Is I'm going to quote someone that I worked with that was much wiser than I was at the time. And he said, because it's when I was in a managerial capacity, he said, you watch your nickels and pennies and your dollars will flow freely. Being that if you watch the little stuff, the bigger stuff kind of takes care of itself. A lot of people want to just deal with the big issues, but you have to deal with it on a lower scale, and sometimes that requires a little bit more work and a little bit more follow through and processing and thinking, listening, paying attention. But I think that's very relevant with CSF leaks as a medical adventure. So yeah, that's it. That's all I have. Way too long of a video, but you guys like and subscribe. Have a fantastic day. If you're on this medical adventure, good luck to you, and hopefully I've been able to expound and help and everything else. I always start these videos thinking they're going to be super short, and I'm going to stay on topic, but I hope to be like this random person this random Michelle Fix It from YouTube person that I'm like your friend. I'm like you're educating. Like, I asked Beat out on this topic, and these are the pieces of information that I have, and I'm probably going to have people sharpshoot me and get grumpy and all this other stuff, but at the end of the day, I'm just trying to help you get to where you're going at a faster rate, because the amount of time that I've been on this journey and didn't even know it could be equated to being a cuckoo bird. Let's just say that. Cuckoo bird's my thing. Because if you say crazy, people like nitpick all the word choices now. And so now I'm having to come up with very crafty ways to say things so that I don't have future nitpicking of like, that's not crazy. Crazy means insane. And people can be insane and like all this other stuff. And like, it's too much paying attention to word usage. I'll probably get fricasseed for that as well. Whatever, it's fine. I'm just trying to educate. I have a house that I should have been painting like an hour and 22 minutes ago. But at least my eyelashes are done, so that's good. Because I'm terrible with my own self-maintenance. So maybe I'll start doing these kind of little videos when I'm dyeing my hair or doing whatever, because then it's just a rambling session. I see that's like a pop culture trending thing where somebody's like doing makeup and then talking and stuff like that, and like that's what this will be. But my eyelashes definitely didn't take 1 hour and 22 minutes, 23 minutes. Like and subscribe. Have a fantastic day. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to add them to the comments. If you're a grumpy person or a grumpy cat or a grumpy anything, then your comments will not make it to the mainstream, because I do censor my comments. But I do not censor free thoughts or any of that stuff. Not like, you know, the political stuff that's going on with commentary that I keep hearing about and I really just don't want to pay attention to. It's more so all of my comments are held in review, and then once they are seen, I release them, and they can be free little comments. But if you are a mean, grumpy person, or if you try to attack another person, then your comments go bye-byes. But if they're, you know, you could be talking about how like a purple tree that's out in the Amazon helped solve your toe problem, and like that's your freedom of speech. But if you talk about how you like want to be a sexist, grumpy person, then that stuff's not going to stay. But like, yeah, Purple tree in the Amazon, that was your thing. Dandelion tea for, not picking at people. Dandelion tea is supposed to help with like intracranial hypertension and stuff. Those are all free thoughts. They're not hurting anyone. I mean, you know, dandelion tea is not going to hurt anyone. It might hurt somebody, but I mean, it's an exchange of information. And at this point in the internet land of thoughts and wisdom and exchanging of information and ideas and ideals, everything basically without being stated has a do at your own risk, and that's just what it is. So like and subscribe. Have a great day. I'll see you next time. Bye. Wait, what is that? Oh, that's just a shadow. My room and this room has a